Judge Cannon's holding more hearings today on the classified documents and how they were taken at Mar-a-Lago by the FBI during the raid that was overseen by Special Counsel Jack Smith. Only the government would ever get away with something like this, by the way. When they seized the documents, they did not keep them in order. So when they provided, which you must do to the defense, like a glossary, right? Or think about a table of contents to the defense team, to the Trump team of here's all these documents we found and here's where you can find them. And even if it's in like lots of different boxes, you can at least have a glossary to know where to look. When the Trump legal defense team started looking, the documents didn't match. So they were out of order. Now we know that there's documents that could be missing, documents that were misplaced, or documents that they could have made up a description for that didn't exist at all. But let's take it one step further. So during the raid, the FBI said to shut the recording off of the security cameras at Mar-a-Lago. They said, don't worry, you can keep the cameras going so you can watch what we're doing, but you can't record it because of security reasons. Except for when they protested that the cameras had been shut off, what happened? They turned the cameras back on. So you see a lot of times law enforcement, and again, not beating up on law enforcement, especially the FBI in this situation, where you've got politicized law enforcement, they treat and they ask you to do things that sound like it would be normal practice that isn't normal practice. And when you ask and say, hey, can we turn these back on? They have to be honest about it and say, yes, we will and will. The idea here that they're rummaging around Mar-a-Lago and for a period of time, we don't know what they were doing.
It raises questions in your mind when you see in this response to the motion by President Trump's defense team, the special counsel's prosecution team says at approximately 9:55 a.m., the CCTV servers were turned off to prevent recording at the request of the FBI out of concern for agent safety. One of the main reasons we talk about things like body camera footage in law enforcement these days is for officer safety. You would think that the FBI and the DOJ here would want more accountability. They would want more transparency. They would want a record if something went awry of what happened. That would do more to preserve the safety of the agents. Instead, you see quite the opposite. They're arguing that not having a recorded record of this is more safe for the agents. But then later in the filing, it says at approximately 10:20 a.m., so about 25 minutes later, recording resumed at the direction of Trump's attorneys. So what you're seeing here is, as Jordan pointed out, that they got them to shut off the recording, but when the attorneys protested and said, no, you got to turn this back on, they complied. So what happened here?
And the good news is that because the Trump attorneys went back and said, no, turn them on, when the real raid, they call it search, but when the real raid occurred and these documents got thrown around, remember those messy pictures to make it look like Donald Trump was having all these documents thrown around his room, and those were all made up? We do have video of most of the raid beginning at 10:33 a.m. And I have a feeling it does not make the FBI look good, especially if they were the ones tossing these documents. And the reason why there's now missing classified documents is not because of President Trump. It's because of the FBI.
It's important to note that Trump's defense can logically make the claim that the evidence obtained during the search warrant should be thrown out due to unconstitutionality because the warrant lacked, as you point out, Jordan, particularity as required by the Fourth Amendment. What does the Fourth Amendment do? It protects every person from an unreasonable government intrusion. And so, secondly, Trump's lawyers can claim that the special counsel, Jack Smith, does not have standing to invoke, for instance, a good faith exception to preserve the evidence from the search because the agents engaged in bad faith in conducting the search. So we have evidence, for instance, that they turned off the recording. Then we have evidence that the recording was turned on. So why would you turn off the recording? There's no basis for doing so unless you're trying to hide something. And guess what? The recording actually protects both the defendant and the FBI. And so then you could go into court and you could basically say to the judge, we conducted this search, the FBI could, in accordance with constitutional principles, why don't you look at the tape? Except the FBI is saying, hey, we want to cut off the tape. It doesn't make sense.
How they tried to show the documents. I still go back to that because in a criminal trial, there's going to be a jury if this ever gets to that point. That photo, we know, was manufactured by the FBI, as if that's what it looked like if you were just walking around Mar-a-Lago.
The other problem with it is another little nugget in this filing by the special counsel is clearly they wanted that photograph out there and they had those cover sheets. You see the secret SCI with a red border and top secret SCI with a yellow border. Those weren't how the documents were in the storage. Those were placeholders and cover sheets brought by the FBI to the raid almost as a prop so they could cover up sensitive information and then take a photograph, and then that's okay for the public to see. They wanted these photos out publicly as quick as possible. And even in the filings, they knew that these would be used as a part of their indictment or their charging documents. And what you see is those photographs. And they got them out so quickly because they had the props with them. It wasn't like they photographed the evidence and then had to go and digitally blur the documents out. As you see many times in court filings, things that should not be shown, they'll blur it out in the actual photograph, but to represent it. They brought props. They were ready to stage this in the manner that they did, and they spread it across the floor and made it look like there were so many classified documents with these big red headlines. How could the president not know that these were secret? Look at these cover sheets. That was the narrative they wanted you to believe, but it wasn't real because in their document, they even said, as a part of processing, the seized documents marked classified. ER2E photographed the documents with appropriate cover sheets added by FBI personnel next to the box in which they were located. Photographs attached, Exhibit 8, are examples. So they weren't even on the floor. They were in that box that is next to it. Yeah. None of it was reality, but that's what they wanted you to believe, that it was a mess, that they were littered everywhere, and he is such a danger to the American security because of how he was treating these documents. It just wasn't real.
The fact that there are documents now missing, so you're going to prosecute someone for documents they can't even see if they actually existed or not. The documents aren't in order. The documents aren't so you made up a glossary, table of contents that doesn't match the documents. The Department of Justice under Jack Smith, they're in a mess. They're in a mess. Let's keep it that way. Let's keep it that way, especially through the election. Because the more they're in a mess, the less that's a distraction issue for the American people. We can talk about the big issues. It also shows you can combat lawfare. It's tough. And the weaponization of our government against people and against politicians.